All right. Good evening, everybody. If I could have everyone's attention, please. Go ahead and get your seats if you would. All right, it's exactly 7 o'clock. I wanted to welcome everybody. My name is Drew Bolin, and my role is president of the Lincoln Club of Colorado. What I'd first like to do is for us to say the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everyone would stand, if you can, and let's go ahead and say Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all. Terrific. Thank you. So thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. Again, my name is Drew Bolin. I'm the president of the Lincoln Club of Colorado. We are the oldest Republican political organization continuous for 106 years. We hope that we will go for, thank you. Our hope is that we will go another 106 years if too much craziness in the legislature doesn't mess with our state or get rid of our state. So we're working really hard to promote Republican values, but we also do promote candidates, but we also go ahead and make contributions to candidates through our small donor committee. And so if anybody wants to donate or become a member of the Lincoln Club of Colorado, you can go onto the website of lincolnclubofcolorado.org. You can register to be a member for $30. We have monthly speakers that are just top notch. And then those funds that we raise, and also from this event, are used to go ahead and they go to our small donor committee to help some candidates start up. I want to thank our board members for the Lincoln Club, Brett Moore, who may be out front, Bev McAdam, who is our secretary, and I think Carl Hoops is here. But I also want to say thank you to Salem Media. They've been wonderful to work with. I also want to thank the new chapter of the El Paso County Republicans, Young Republicans. They've been amazing to work with. And it is a special night, and it's a special place. We're in Centennial Hall. Centennial, refers to Colorado. 100 years after 1776, we became a state. So we're here in Centennial Hall. And then 3 blocks west of here is the America the Beautiful Park with spectacular views of Pikes Peak. And those are both symbols of how great and how beautiful our country is. But we need to have great leaders to make sure that we continue to be a great country. And I got to tell you, I've been so moved by working with the young Republicans, their energy, their drive, their thoughtfulness, their compassion. It's been absolutely wonderful to work with them, and it gives me great hope for the future. So I want to introduce Colby Zipper, who is the president of the El Paso County Young Republicans. Thanks, Drew.
Thanks a lot, Drew. And thanks for Lincoln Club allowing us to co-host this really important CD5 debate along with Salem Media. El Paso County didn't have a Young Republicans active chapter, and so we just decided we wanted to get it going. Joel, actually, if you don't mind, I'll stand up and get some recognition. So Joel is the co-chair, and he's been instrumental in helping me learn about politics, and it's insane that we're here speaking in front of so many people. So I think 2.5 months ago, there was just me and Joel, and then 30 minutes later, there were 7 of us, and now I think we're flirting with 70 or 80 or something like that. So, I want to introduce next Chris Gold. Chris is the general manager for Salem Media and the senior vice president of the national. Oh man, I should have studied a little bit harder. Yeah, Chris is incredibly important. He's been around for over 20 years with Salem Media. Started in Tampa. I think they had 1 radio station, and now they have 8, right? And now he's here overseeing 5 radio stations. I think I better let him talk about his national presence, but it has to do with talking to hundreds of radio stations. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you so much, Colby. we're really thankful to be here today and to be hosting this event, bringing Dave Williams and Jeff Crank together so that we can all of us can learn a little bit more about them and their candidacy. I'm super thankful to have my wife here, who doesn't really come to very many events, but Michelle's here in the front row, along with Marilyn. And our team is really fantastic. We've got an engineer downstairs, so we've been on the air live for the last hour, interviewing people and talking about this debate, and now we're going to be live on the air across southern Colorado. I love it. I love live programming, and I'm super thankful for the team that we have to be able to present this content. Our moderator is Dirk Hobbs. Dirk is the publisher for the North Magazine and then also for the Southern Colorado Business Journal, which I was just telling somebody about that. Yeah, and so Dirk has been making inroads, and he's been part of our team in terms of moderating debates in the past. He helped to moderate the mayoral debate last year and did a fantastic job. I think you're going to be very impressed, and I think you're going to be motivated to vote. And so without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our friend Dirk Hobbs.
Thank you, Frank.
Thanks, Frank.
Appreciate you. That's not going to work. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dirk Hobbs, and it is my outstanding pleasure, and I am humbled to be a part of the democratic process in this way. What an honor. I appreciate both gentlemen taking a moment to share your thoughts and views on your candidacy for the open seat that Doug Lamborn is leaving behind. We did have a coin flip, and Mr. Crank has elected to answer the questions first. Mr. Williams will go second. In the end, it'll be the reverse when they have 3 minutes to close their remarks. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question that we pose outside of their opening and closing remarks. So 3 minutes for opening and closing remarks, 2 minutes to answer the questions, and then each one of them will have 1 minute to rebut the others. If either candidate mentions the other candidate's name, and I'll regulate this, you don't have to keep track of it, okay? But if they do, I will allow the other candidate to rebut once more for 1 minute, okay? We have a very sophisticated clock. It's that yellow piece of paper right there. Okay? So this is the 15-second warning, gentlemen, okay? 15 seconds to wrap up your thoughts when he holds that up like that, all right? So it's within an eye shot, and it should be easily recognized. If you go over too much more than that, I'm going to do a hard interruption and just stop you. Fair enough? All right. Audience, the electorate, how you doing? All right. We're going to behave ourselves tonight. Yes, we're on live radio. So I would like to ask, and it's a little awkward because there's a little bit of silence in between the candidates' remarks and when we go over here. But I would like to ask that you refrain from applause in between each candidate's remark, and I'll give you a green light, big, huge green light at the end to applaud both of them. Fair enough? All right. Let's see here. Gentlemen, I think we understand. We had a conversation beforehand about just the general decorum of the room, right? I don't mind a heated, feisty debate, but beyond that, let's keep it civil and friendly. This is the American Republic. We're all on the same page. We're all on the same team. Are you ready to begin? Are you ready to begin, Mr. Williams? All right. Then let's begin. Okay, question number 1. Where did it go? There it is. And we'll start with Mr. Crank. Kind of a soft opener here, sir. What are your top legislative priorities, and how would you plan to address them?
Do we get an opening or no?
Oh, see, he's already got me in check. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
All right. All right. Opening remarks. Let's go to Mr. Crank. 3 minutes, sir.
All right. Dirk, thank you. Thanks to the Lincoln Club of Colorado, Salem Media, this amazing young Republicans group from El Paso County for putting this on. It's a great honor to do this, and it's a great honor to run for Congress. This is the greatest country on the face of the earth, and very few people ever get the chance to run for United States Congress, and I've been so honored to be able to do that in the past and to do it today. I was born and raised in southern Colorado, and I've seen Colorado change. I was born and raised here, have spent 30 years of my life fighting for conservative values right here in Colorado Springs and in El Paso County. I did that for 14 years on the radio. I worked also in, before that, to keep Fort Carson open through 2 rounds of base closure, and worked with our military installations to make sure that they're sound and they're secure and they have great missions. I have been in this community fighting for those values. Many of you know me from the radio, know that when the COVID mandate came down, I didn't take it. I said, enough's enough. I'm going to walk away from a career in radio and from a show in radio because principles meant more to me than standing for the tyranny that they imposed on their employees. I have several things that we need to get done in Washington. First and foremost is the border. The border and the Biden policies on the border are a disaster. They are ruining America. They are shredding the Constitution, and they are shredding the rule of law. And we must hold the Biden administration accountable. We must build Trump's wall. We must do everything that we can to fix the border. I've visited it twice, and I can tell you they can control the border if they have the political will to do so. We also need to fix a broken economy. Americans are hurting because of inflation running rampant across the United States. Families are hurting, and it's all caused by bad decisions of the federal government. It's all caused by Joe Biden's decisions to increase spending and Congress's inability to control spending. We've got to get that under control. And we've also got to examine the size and scope of the federal government. For once and for all, we've got $35 trillion of debt. And we're passing that on to our children, our grandchildren, and their children. And that's a moral outrage. We have to fix that. I am endorsed by lots of folks in our community. We'll talk about that. I'm endorsed by a ton of people here, a lot of good conservatives who have gone before us and have done everything they can to make this a great community. I look forward to this debate, and thank you all for your time.
I appreciate that. It's a natural instinct, but Mr. Williams, 3 minutes, sir. Opening remarks.
Thank you so much. I'm Dave Williams. I'm chairman of the Colorado Republican Party, and I'm also the Trump-endorsed candidate for Colorado Congressional District 5. Thank you so much for being here. I agree that this is the stuff that keeps America going. When Ben Franklin was asked, what system of government we got, and he told them a republic, if you can keep it. This is us maintaining the republic. And that's so important for us to understand because right now, Washington, D.C. is broken. We have politicians who say one thing and then do another, and like you, I hate that. That's one of the reasons, probably the main reason why our government does not work for us, and it's certainly a reason why our Republican Party has suffered throughout the years, because we have say-anything politicians who promise you one thing, pay lip service to what you want to hear, but then when they think you're not paying attention, they do the very opposite of that. Case in point, our House Republicans passed a $1.2 trillion omnibus spending bill that gave Democrats pretty much every single priority they wanted. And yet they want us to pat them on the back and say they did a good job. That's the problem we have in Washington. When I was in the legislature for about 6 years, I served House District 15. I could tell you stories not only about the Democrats and their hypocrisy and their corruption, but even Republicans. I remember one time a Republican colleague of mine in caucus meeting said that he had to support a bill that Jared Polis was putting forward because it was going to pass anyway, so he might as well have his name on it and get the credit for it. You want to know why bad things happen in Washington? I'll tell you why. First and foremost, I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus Christ. He's my Lord and Savior, and that's how I make all my decisions, is through that lens and my faith in our Lord and Savior. There's a scripture that comes to mind as to why bad things happen. It's because of the love of money. It's the root of all evil. You want to know why politicians fail you? You want to know why they don't do what you want them to do? It's because they get elected, they get into the swamp, and then they reason to themselves that if they just play in this system, they'll enrich themselves, their buddies, the constituencies that got them elected in the first place, and it's at your expense. We need to end that corruption, and that's why Donald Trump has endorsed my campaign. That's why I've been endorsed by the House Freedom Caucus. That's why I've been endorsed by many national groups and leaders throughout this country, because they know that the status quo cannot be maintained. We are losing our country, and if we don't get actual fighters with a proven record, then we're going to fail. And that's the difference between myself and my opponent. I actually have that record. So please vote for me. Please support me, and together we'll make America great again.
You're just not going to do it, are you? You're going to keep, okay, that's all right. All right, so now that we are in the formal debate format, I would ask you to please reserve your applause until the end of the debate. Please, thank you. All right, gentlemen, 2 minutes on the clock. You ready, sir? All right. Question number 1 to Mr. Crank. What are your top legislative priorities, and how do you plan to address them, if elected?
You bet. Well, I hit on them in my opening. First and foremost is the border. We have to get control of the border. We have to have border security. That means building Trump's wall, but it also means drones, technology, sensors, and hiring more Border Patrol agents. Most of you may not know this. I was surprised when I was down at the border and had a Border Patrol agent briefing me, and he told me there are more New York Police Department officers than there are Border Patrol agents in the entire United States. NYPD has more police officers than all of Border Patrol throughout the whole United States. That's a shame, and this Biden administration is part of the reason. They threw them under the bus. You remember the quote-unquote horsewhipping incident that Joe Biden and his administration tried to perpetuate on the men and women who fight for us every day on the border. So that's number 1, is getting control of the border. Number 2 is getting rid of these bad policies, spending too much money. There's one thing that causes inflation in America, anywhere in the world. It's a law of economics. It's too much money. Who prints money? The federal government. We have to stop the federal government from printing so much money. How do we do that? We do that by examining the $35 trillion in debt that we currently have. And we need to go there. And one of my priorities, and I've made this clear, when I get there in the first 90 days, I will introduce legislation to eliminate federal agencies, and several of them. The U.S. Department of Education is the first to go. The National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for Democracies, many others. Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and lots more. We have to get control of our fiscal house, and if we don't do that, America will fail. And if America fails, there is nowhere else to go.
Mr. Williams, your rebuttal.
Yeah, look, I think the number 1 priority is the invasion that we have on the southern border. We are not going to have a country if we don't actually protect our border and ensure that we know who's actually coming over and what their purposes are. There's many ways we can get a handle on that. First, we have to bolster enforcement, immigration enforcement. We have to provide for new employees and increase border security, but we also need to get to the root cause. Many of the illegal aliens that come here, they actually take money under the table, they're paid under the table, and then they send it back over the border. If we want to get a handle on that, then we need to require that proof of citizenship or residency before those transactions take place. But first and foremost, the best thing to do is to get Donald Trump reelected, because when he had the Remain in Mexico policy in place, we had a good handle on our border. When he was in charge and he had his people running the border, we were in a better spot. If we don't do that, then we're going to lose greatly and badly. Joe Biden has been a disaster for this. The second priority that I have is getting a handle on inflationary spending. They're killing us. They're killing your dollar, and they're enriching themselves. It's not just them spending. It's also giving it to their buddies. Again, I'm the only candidate here that's proud not to have Speaker Johnson's endorsement. Why? Because he's actually taking your money and giving it to Democrats or special interest groups. I'm proud not to have Tom Emmer's endorsement because they're contributing to the problem. Again, there are Republicans who are bankrupting you and your children. The question is, who do you trust? I have an actual record of voting against tax increases, voting against budgets increases, and making sure that we get a handle on the spending that we desperately need to have a handle on. Those are the two major priorities, but my priority right now is to make sure that we defeat Joe Biden and the crooked Democrats and elect Donald Trump so that we can make America great again.
Very good. Question number one with Mr. Williams. Did you want to address that same question, what your top legislative priorities are, or do you feel you have answered that question?
You give me a lot of time. I'll tell you more for sure. Ladies and gentlemen, there's so many problems that we have in this country. Those are the top two, but there's more that we do need to address. One of the things that we don't really talk about is government corruption. There are so many slick-talking politicians who will go to you, shake your hand, tell you what you want to hear so that they can get into power. And once they actually get into power, they make friends, or they already had friendships, with dark money groups, with billionaire puppet masters who have an agenda. I assure you, Americans for Prosperity, Charles Koch, they're not giving my opponent or spending on the behalf of my opponent to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars because they think he's a swell guy. There's an agenda. There's something there. Now, whether or not that happens, I don't know. Hopefully, I win the election and I can go fight for you. But my point is that there is a corrupting influence in government. And if we don't get a handle on that, we're going to, again, lose what our ancestors fought for, what our founders tried to give us. There's corrupt insider trading for congressmen. Congressmen take private information and that they get through government intelligence, and then they act on it, and then they enrich themselves. There are congressmen who engage in corrupt dealings, enrich themselves. I mean, I don't know in what world where a congressman goes in at a certain level of wealth, but then it increases after a decade. Look at Nancy Pelosi. She's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but that's not how she came in to Congress. Republicans do it too. And so if we really want to get a handle on this country, we need to reinstall integrity into Congress, and it starts here locally, and I ask for your support.
Mr. Crank, 1 minute rebuttal.
Well, you have to exhibit integrity every day of your life, not just when you get to Congress. I work for the chairman of the House Ethics Committee. I know about integrity. I talked about leaving my job at the radio station because they chose to take away my freedom and impose tyranny. Talking about, attacks on other organizations like Americans for Prosperity. That's the same Americans for Prosperity, by the way, that's spending $2.5 million right now trying to get rid of the Democrat senator in Montana. Another $2.5 million to get rid of the Democrat senator in Nevada, and another $2.5 million to get rid of the Democrat senator in Pennsylvania. So that's who he's talking about. They want principled leaders to go to Washington, D.C. That's what they want. But when you talk about integrity, you gotta live it. You gotta step down when you're the chairman of the party and you want to run for an office. Integrity matters. It really does. And I hope you'll look at integrity and who's shown it.
Very good. Mr. Crank, you're back up for 2 minutes on the following question. Actually, I'm going to award each candidate 3 minutes because there are several topics within this that you're going to want to address. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes to respond to this, and then a 1-minute rebuttal for each of you. What is your stance on the key issues as follows? Immigration, southern border, legal and illegal, economic growth and inflation, education and parental rights, healthcare. Mr. Crank, 3 minutes.
Okay,
If you need me to repeat any of that, just let me know.
Okay, great. Immigration and economy?
In immigration, legal and illegal, economic growth and inflation, education and parental rights, and healthcare.
Sure. Well, it's a lot. First off, on immigration, we've talked about a lot about that, but we should talk a lot about that. That's our biggest priority. When it comes to illegal immigration, we have no choice but to stop it. If we want to have a rule of law in the United States of America, you can't just continue to ignore laws. You can change them if you don't like them, but if you just ignore them, you lose the rule of law. And then once we lose the rule of law in America, we've lost everything. We can't afford to do that. So we have to hold the Biden administration accountable. I visited 2 times down to the border, met with the Border Patrol both times. I met with the mayor of Yuma, Arizona, and I met with folks down in McAllen, Texas. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy for the illegal immigrants that are coming, who are being told by our government to come, and they make a 1,000-mile journey, and little girls are being raped and trafficked because our government's telling them it's okay. It's not okay. That's immoral that our government is doing now. We need to stop the Biden administration from doing that. On legal immigration, that system's broken too. We have to fix that system, but you cannot fix that system until you get border security. Once we have border security, we ought to fix the system so that people don't try and cut in line. There are people, good people, who want to come to the United States. I talk to them all the time, people who come here from all over the world, but they do it legally. And we ought to fix a system that's broken so that people can continue to do that. On the economy, look, government's too big. Government is terrible at picking winners and losers in the economy. We see it when they tell you what kind of car you should drive, what kind of energy you should use, all of those things. The government is telling Americans how and what to do and the way that they should live. And it's costing families. There are families that can't afford to put gas in their car because government is choosing green energy over oil and gas. And it's a real world impact to people. So that's very, very important. Education and healthcare?
Education and healthcare.
Education and healthcare. Education, simple. We need more school choice. We need more education savings accounts. And we need to have much more freedom when it comes to parents being able to make the choice and not government make the choice. I want to abolish the Federal Department of Education, send the power back to the states so that you as parents can choose for your children what is the best education. It is a travesty that we would do anything else.
Time. Thank you, sir. Mr. Williams, you have 3 minutes to address the following: immigration, legal and illegal, economic growth and inflation, education and parental rights, and healthcare.
Okay, great. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to close the border. We need to secure it. We need to bolster enforcement. We need to make sure that asylum seekers are remaining in a separate country, not our own, so that we don't have any more spillage. And and this is something that's near and dear to my heart, right? I am the chairman of the Colorado Republican Party. I support Donald Trump. I want our nominee to win. But when Americans for Prosperity raise $70 million to take him out so that they could elect Nikki Haley, who is an avowed globalist, that's a problem, right? And the question you should be asking yourself is, why did my opponent say it was courageous for AFP to oppose Donald Trump and support Nikki Haley? Why did he applaud that decision if he's such an America First, closed border security candidate? I don't buy it. You want me to look at record? I'm looking at the record. I'm looking at the exact words. If we're going to get a handle on this country, we need to elect America First congressional candidates who are actually going to stop the madness at the southern border. And then when it comes to legal immigration, we need to go back to a merit-based system. No more should we have a lottery system where people can just come in. We need people legally coming in who can contribute to this country and be productive members of our society. When it comes to economic growth, the best thing we can do is stop the government spending. Don't agree with leadership in the Republican Washington establishment, the uniparty even, where they want to spend you into oblivion and then act like they're doing something good. And then we need to cut regulation and red tape and unleash American enterprise. This country was built on free enterprise, free market capitalism, and the more we get government out of it, the more that we cut onerous, burdensome regulations on business owners, you're going to see an increase in jobs, and you're certainly going to see an uptick in the economy. When it comes to parental rights, parents should be the first and last say on the upbringing and education of their children. In fact, when it comes to public school system, it is failing right now here in Colorado and across the country. When I was in the state legislature, I would continuously have this debate with Democrats, but I would go to the well, I'd make the case why we need more competition in schools, why we need money to follow children as opposed to systems and failing school systems. But I would end it with this: get your kids out of public school right now. Homeschool them. Because right now you have crazy left-wing woke teachers who are trying to indoctrinate your children and convince them that if you're a boy, you can be a girl and vice versa. That's not education. If we're going to succeed, we need to start focusing on the fundamentals: reading, writing, and arithmetic. And what's the last one?
Healthcare.
Healthcare, it should be privatized and we should get the government out of it. We don't want ration care. I can talk more about that, but ultimately we need to make sure that people can have choice and competition, not government mandates.
First rebuttal goes to Mr. Crank. 1 minute, sir.
As he mentioned me. Is that right? Okay, great. Yeah, there's this fixation on Nikki Haley for some reason. That was during a primary that Americans for Prosperity, not Jeff Crank. I'm the guy running for Congress, not Americans for Prosperity. They chose to endorse someone in a primary. Okay, they did. Now they've moved on. They aren't still supporting Nikki Haley. They've moved on. It's just my opponent who seems to not be able to move on from that. They've moved on to fight to get Republicans to win in places, as I said, like Montana, where we have to get control of the United States Senate, places in Pennsylvania, Nevada, other places. But it's just to try and divide, to continue to divide the Republican Party. I support Donald Trump. I helped him in 2016. I emceed his rallies in 2016. I defended him on air for 4 years as president. I supported him in 2020. I've supported him in 2024. I voted for him in the primary in 2024. But he just continues to want to use that as a wedge issue for his own personal gain.
Mr. Williams, 1 minute.
Look, ladies and gentlemen, you can go look at the video. You can see what my opponent said. I'll give you the timeline. December 2023, my opponent talking to his employer, his boss, talking about how wonderful it is they're taking on Donald Trump. Even though he was pretty much the nominee even then, we just had to wait a little bit to get to it. That's December 2023. January 2024, Doug Lamborn announces his retirement. Same time frame, my opponent announces his run for Congress and then has a conversion all of a sudden that Donald Trump's the one to be. I've been consistent in supporting Donald Trump, and that's why he endorsed me, and that's why he trusts me. I'd ask for your vote.
All right, I'm going to ask the audience to look at the screens. There is a cell number up there. I've already received a number of questions. If you have a question that you would like asked on the forum tonight, it looks like we're going to have some time. I encourage you to go ahead and text your question very succinctly to that number on the screen. In the meantime, we'll move on with the formal debate question. This question goes to Mr. Crank. What should the United States of America's energy policy be? Does that include our adherence to renewable energy mandates, federal or international? Mr. Crank, 2 minutes.
Dirk, was that just a way to get your phone number out there?
Yeah. No.
Look, energy is one of the great, sad ways that the Biden administration is rigging the system against everyday Americans. Government's bad at making decisions. They're bad at choosing winners and losers in a market. You know who's good at it? The American people. The free market system is good at that. You ought to be the ones making the choice about whether you want to buy an electric car. You ought to be the one making the choice if you want a more fuel-efficient car or a less fuel-efficient car, if you want a truck or you want a small car. That should be the choice that you're making. But government's taken that out of your hands because they think they know better. And the Biden administration has banned oil and gas leases on federal lands. They've gone up to Anwar up in Alaska, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and banned it there. They banned it off the coast of California. They are literally trying to choke off oil and gas exploration in the United States so that they can move to this scam that they've got going on green energy. And by the way, their buddies are getting rich on green energy. We have got to get the government out of the marketplace. Let technology decide. Let business and industry decide based on what you want to buy. If you want to buy an electric car, go right ahead. Doesn't bother me at all. But it does bother me when the federal government or you try to tell me what kind of car I should drive. I'm for freedom. I'm for liberty. And I will look at everything, whether it's energy policy or anything else in Washington, through the lens of freedom and liberty. Does it provide more freedom or less to people with a piece of legislation that I'm going to vote on? That's what we should be doing in energy, and we are not doing that, and we're allowing the rest of the world to produce energy, and our workers are suffering for that.
Mr. Williams, would you like me to repeat the question?
Please.
What should the United States of America's energy policy be? And does that include our adherence to renewable energy mandates, federal or international? 2 minutes, sir.
Well, generally speaking, this is true across the board. It's especially true when it comes to energy policy. It should be very, very light touch. If we want a successful energy policy in America, we should unleash free enterprise and then allow for free market capitalism to do its thing. I don't know if any of you are familiar with some of the spending that's been going on in the green energy so-called industry, but Joe Biden earmarked $7.5 billion to develop a series of EV charging stations. He only has done 4 so far. He's not only wasting your money, and probably someone's getting rich off it, but he's also hurting those who produce energy that we all rely on. Fossil fuel is something that has lifted many people out of poverty. It's one of the reasons why America has had the kind of economic engine that we've seen over the years. Because in any successful business environment, you have to have the energy in order to ensure your success. So we need to get the government out of it. We need to expand into federally owned lands and let those people explore and develop. But we also need to look at expanding upon nuclear energy. If we really care about the environment, we should look at one of the best tools available to us to ensure that we aren't polluting as much as you might be in some other energy sector through nuclear power. And I know there's a lot of good Republicans who are working on that at the state and federal level, but that's something that I would be a part of and be happy to work towards. I do think, just to touch on protecting our environment, I do think we can have a robust fossil fuel industry or what other energy industry that the market dictates while protecting the beauty of what we have here in Colorado and across the country. I'm a Christian. I believe that God gave us this planet to be good stewards of it, to ensure that we have clean water and clean air, but I don't want to do it at the expense of individuals who we might leave behind in this economy and worse off. So we can walk and chew gum and do both responsibly in a balanced way.
Mr. Crank, do you have a rebuttal? 1 minute.
Well, yeah, look, I agree. I think we've been given a false choice by the left. They say you can either have oil and gas development or you can have a clean environment. That's a false choice. We can have both. And they prove it every single day in the United States. And in fact, we do it cleaner than any other country in the world. So we ought to be the ones doing this. And the Biden administration, part of our problem with our economy right now is that the Biden administration is picking winners and losers, shutting down oil and gas, and they're killing jobs all across the United States. One of the biggest pipeline companies, the biggest pipeline company in the United States is headquartered right here in Colorado Springs. They're impacted by that. There's so many jobs that we're losing across America, good paying jobs, because the Biden administration refuses to allow the free market to work and decide what kind of energy we'll use.
Mr. Williams, your rebuttal, 1 minute, sir.
I mean, ladies and gentlemen, drill, baby, drill. I mean, we've been saying that mantra for years. I mean, we really want to succeed. And by the way, this is a national security issue, too. If we're not independently able to have a robust energy source for our own country, then we're going to be reliant on foreign countries. And that's certainly not an America First proposition. But the best thing to do is to ensure that we're not dependent on anyone. And that's why I think we need to expand in exploration and development. That's why I think we need to go towards nuclear energy. That's why I think we need to ensure that the government is not subsidizing failing energy sources, because they really don't work. They just don't. I mean, again, if you want to buy an electric car, go ahead. But at the end of the day, most people want a combustion engine. So do I. And we're going to make sure we do everything to protect your right and freedom to do so.
Next question is a little closer to home. Mr. Crank, you have 2 minutes to start. Space Command has been determined to be in full operational capability. If a future administration reversed course and made a choice to move Space Command to another location, costing potentially billions of dollars and degrading national security, would you side with the future administration?
Well, I'll side with the taxpayers, and I'll side with our military, our generals and others in our military leaders. They believe it should be right here. That's what they said. That's what our generals have said. And if you look at what it would cost to move Space Command from Colorado Springs, it would cost billions of dollars, and it would not be ready for several years in a new home, no matter where that home would be. So it doesn't make any sense for the taxpayers, and it doesn't make any sense for the military. So I will stand and work with our community. I've been endorsed by the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, Mike Rogers, and I will work with him, and I'll work with others. I'll work with communities leaders like I did many years ago to keep Fort Carson open. And we'll double down, and we'll work in this community to make sure that Space Command is headquartered right here in Colorado Springs. And the way you do that is working in the community with the people who, many of the people who have already endorsed me. They endorse me because they know me. They endorse me because I have a history of working with them on these issues. And look, it just should never be a political decision. We shouldn't decide that we're going to move it somewhere else because of any political reason. It should all be based on military value. And it's very clear that the military value for Space Command is right here in Colorado Springs.
Mr. Williams, open with 2 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, it's incredibly vital that we keep Space Command here. You know, our city has a diverse group of good labor force from which we could pull from. We have many folks who not only served in the military in our region, but they also retired and came here. So it just makes all the sense in the world, because we have the capability, we have the labor force, we have the resources to do a good job, and it's a national security crisis. China right now is actually outpacing us when it comes to space capabilities. And that's a scary thing to think about. And it's because Democrats and even some weak Republicans have failed to actually keep pace with that. So I believe that we should keep it here. And I also don't think that we should keep it here based on abortion, because that's what Joe Biden did. Again, I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe in the scriptures. And there's this one scripture that comes to mind when we talk about how Joe Biden justified keeping it here based on abortion with one simple, I think, scriptural truth. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world but lose his soul? Ladies and gentlemen, if the decision is we keep it here, but at the expense of unborn children and slaughtering them in the womb, I can't go with that. I'll fight. I'll fight to keep Space Command here because I believe we can win it on our merits. And here's the truth. Donald Trump, when he gets back into the White House, he's going to make the decision, the final decision between here and Alabama. You're going to want the guy that he endorsed, and I have his cell phone number in my phone, calling him up, making the case. Because everyone in Congress, they're not going to be the ones necessarily driving the bus. It's going to be Donald Trump. So go with the guy that he supports.
Mr. Crank, 1 minute rebuttal.
Well, it's not what you always said, Dave. To be honest with you, you did talk about, first of all, this doesn't have anything to do with abortion. This should be a decision about the military, what is best for the military, and what is best for the taxpayer. It's the United States Space Command. We shouldn't be talking, a decision shouldn't be made by anyone on any political issue, whether it's President Trump or whether it's the current president, Biden. I'm pro-life, but he didn't ask us about our view on unborn children. I'm pro-life, but he asked us about Space Command. My opponent said before that if it was about unborn children, it was okay to move it to Alabama. He said it, it's a quote. Actually was in a letter he wrote. So he's changed his position on it. There's no doubt about that. He has changed his position on it. I am going to be the one that fights with this community to keep Space Command here.
Mr. Williams, 1 minute.
I mean, there you go again, Jeff. I haven't changed my position. I've been very consistent on this. If it's an issue of abortion, I'm not going to get behind it. Why? Because ultimately, we only live 80 years on this planet. I believe that I'm going to have to give an account to my Lord and Savior on Judgment Day. And if he asks me, why did you allow the slaughter of unborn children for some sort of political points or economic growth in your region, what am I going to say to that? I'm not going to do that. And that's exactly what this issue boiled down to, and it's why weak Republicans, like my opponent, want to stick their head in the sand. They act like Joe Biden wasn't considering abortion policy when it came to the decision here. And that's the problem we have in the military right now, is that they are not making decisions based on military capability or national defense. They're making decisions based on their social issues, which are evil and immoral, and I'm not going to stand for it.
Mr. Crank, 1 minute rebuttal as he mentioned your name.
Sure. Again, this isn't about abortion. It's just not. I'm pro-life. I'm going to defend the unborn. I'm going to fight like heck to defend the unborn. But I am not going to try and say that this is about abortion. It's about Space Command, a military command. It was here already, by the way. It was located here when President Trump made the decision to move it somewhere else. So it was here. It wasn't a decision based on abortion. It was here. It was based on military necessity to have it here. Then it was moved. It was going to be moved somewhere else. It shouldn't be made on abortion. It's just crazy that we're even talking about this. If we want to talk about abortion, we can. But that's different than Space Command. And we shouldn't be trying to pull that in to the argument. That's kind of an excuse for why you said what you said, Dave, way back when.
Part B of this question is the National Defense Authorization Act plays an outside role on our economy here in this community. As Congressman, what will you do to advocate for in it? Yes, sir. Mr. Crank, 2 minutes.
Okay, so the National Defense Authorization Act is passed. It's one of the few things Congress actually does every year. They don't do much. They gridlock a lot, but they do pass the National Defense Authorization Act. The House Armed Services Committee passes that bill, goes to the House, goes to the Senate, and they're able to pass that every year. It includes things like pay raises for our military, our men and women in the military. Our weapon systems. It is the most important thing, quite frankly, that the federal government funds, is our U.S. military to defend us. It is the most important bill that the Congress passes, in my view, each and every year. We can't load it up with a bunch of stuff that's going to weigh it down and prevent soldiers from getting housing or preventing soldiers from getting pay. It must be protected at all costs. We need to do everything we can to make sure that we pass a clean National Defense Authorization Act. Every year, if we want to put other things in bills, we can. This is what people dislike about Congress. When people go take something that is their pet project and they go try and sneak it in some other bill. We shouldn't do that as Republicans, and we shouldn't do it. We shouldn't let the Democrats get away with it either. The defense bill is a defense bill. It should be for the defense of this nation and the support of our men and women who wear the uniform and nothing else.
Mr. Williams, 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm glad this is brought up. Here's the dirty little secret that not many people will tell you. Every single bill that goes to Washington is unclean. That is especially true with the NDAA. And one thing, I have to address this. This is something that I'm not going to let skirt by. You just heard my opponent say that he would support the basing decisions in America, even if it included abortion policy. Right? If Joe Biden said, I want to move this base over here because it's a blue state and it's a great state for abortion, he's going to be okay with it, and he's going to justify it through some other lens, like all the other failed leaders in the Uniparty and especially in the Republican establishment. They don't want to talk about abortion. So here's my question to my opponent. Jeff, if abortion was the driving force on a basing decision, would you support it? Yes or no? And then the second thing about this particular issue, especially with the NDAA, is are you going to vote for an unclean NDAA? Because I'll tell you right now, they loaded up with Planned Parenthood funding, they loaded up with woke DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion nonsense to try and socially engineer our military, among other things. I'll promise you this, I'm not going to vote for 1 red cent in any public policy if it has that kind of crap in it. Because that's what the American people want, that's what they deserve, and that's what this district deserves. We can't continue to fund the policies of Democrats. We can't continue to indebt our country further, especially when we're talking about these policies. And that's the difference between me and my opponent. I'm not going to vote to increase the budget. I'm not going to vote to increase spending, especially if it has those disastrous Democrat policies in place, because it's going to ruin our country. We don't have much time left, and if we don't get a handle on this, and if we don't have Republican fighters who are going to say no and draw a line in the sand, then we're going to hurt. So please vote for me and work with me to ensure that we protect our American way of life.
Mr. Crank, 1 minute rebuttal, sir.
Yeah, I'll answer it for the, 4th or 5th time. I'm not for making basing decisions based on politics. If Joe Biden were to say he wanted to leave something in Colorado because of its abortion policy, I'm not going to support that. It should be based on military need. I've said it 3 times. I just said it again. I'm not going to do that. I'm also not going to support putting all these kinds of things in a defense authorization bill. A defense authorization bill is to pay our soldiers who are desperately underpaid right now. We should never hold that up. Never. We shouldn't use them as hostages in some battle that we have. There's other vehicles to do that. If we want to fight on other issues, we should. And I will stand up and fight against Planned Parenthood funding. I will stand up and fight for the unborn. But I'm not going to do it at the expense of the men and women who wear the uniform in the United States.
Mr. Williams, 1 minute.
I hope all of you saw that sort of sleight of hand, right? No one's going to say to a Republican primary voter base that, hey, we need to have these kind of things in an NDAA. The question is, are you going to vote for it if it's in there? Because when push comes to shove, there's going to be a bill in front of you. There's no more going to be, there's not going to, at some point, not going to be any negotiation. There's not going to be any more splitting of hairs and whatnot. There's going to be a vote. Our congressman, Doug Lamborn, has voted multiple times for an NDAA that had Planned Parenthood funding, that had woke diversion, or diversity, inclusion, and equity stuff in it. That stuff was in it, and he voted for it. And that's what I think you all deserve to know between the both of us. I'm telling you right now, I'm not voting 1 red cent for any of that crap. I'm going to vote for what is true and good and what the American people in this district want.
Mr. Crank, 2-minute question, and there's several parts in it. What is your approach to national security and foreign policy regarding specific to international trade in the support of Israel? And part 3, the war in Ukraine.
Well, obviously, America plays a very unique role in the world. We always have since our founding, and particularly since World War II. We play a very unique role. We have to continue to be a good actor on the world stage, because you know what? There's a lot of bad people. China, many others, North Korea, many others that are out there that are not good actors. Russia. If we aren't there to be the offset to that, I fear what may happen in the world. We need to be the beacon of hope like we have been in many years past. The Berlin Wall came down because of Ronald Reagan, and Ronald Reagan standing firm. And we should be there to help other people become free in the world. So that's generally my view of the role of America. When it comes to Israel, I will stand 100% with the people of Israel. On September 11th, we were attacked. We had one ally who stood with us no matter what, and that was the nation of Israel. On October 7th, they had their September 11th. And they had millions of people attacked mercilessly by these animals. We need to stand by them. There was nobody back on September 11th saying, oh, you've got to negotiate with Al-Qaeda. America ran them into caves and killed them. And that's exactly what we should have done, and that's exactly what Israel should do with Hamas. And we should stand by them as Americans. So I think it is critical that America stand by the state of Israel. And I will do that no matter what. My Christian faith calls me to do that. Their God is my God, and that's where my bond comes from with them.
Would you like me to repeat the question, Mr. Williams?
Sure.
Very good. What is your approach to national security and foreign policy as it relates to the following: international trade, the war in Ukraine, and our relationship with Israel?
Sure. Well, free trade, free markets, free enterprise, these are things, again, that are the bedrock of our society, and we need to make sure that we create policy that unleashes that. And that's true with trade, international trade. But when it comes to bad actors like China, we need to use every tool at our disposal to ensure that they're not stealing our intellectual property, that they're not cornering the market on rare earth minerals. They dominate in that sector, and that's going to bite us in the butt if we don't get a handle on that. And look, if we're opening up markets with whatever country, we need to make sure it's good, free trade policy, but it also requires fairness, not only to American businesses, but to the American worker. So I'm all for free trade, provided that it's also fair and that we're not taken advantage of, especially by our adversaries. When it comes to Israel, we absolutely need to stand with Israel. I will bless those who bless you. I will bless those or I'll curse you, those who curse you. That's scriptural. Again, I believe in Jesus Christ. I'm a Christian. I'm sorry if you don't want to hear it. Too bad. So sad. That's the only way to salvation. With all that said, we need to be able to stand firmly for Israel, especially in light of the terrorist attacks on October 7th. That was a tragedy, and we need to do whatever we can to make sure that they defend their right to exist. And what was the other part of that question?
War in Ukraine, support of
yeah.
Israel.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, no more funding for the Ukraine. I'm sorry. I can't do it, won't do it. And unlike other weak Republicans and even my opponent, I'm not going to pussyfoot around it. I'm not going to tiptoe around it. They are corrupt. They have been wasting our money. The Pentagon proved it. They even admitted it. We have a southern border crisis. We need to fund protecting our borders before we protect anyone else's.
Mr. Crank, 1-minute rebuttal, sir.
Well, yeah, and look, I agree. We should fund the border. That's the top priority. We shouldn't do anything before we do that. That should be the number one priority, is funding the border and getting control of the U.S.-Mexico border. And, by the way, the U.S.-Canada border. Got people sneaking in through that border as well. So that's important. Look, on Ukraine, I'm not one who believes that Russia and Vladimir Putin is some starry-eyed romantic person. He's not. He was a KGB agent. He's a killer. And he's trying to reconstitute the old Soviet Union. Let's not kid ourselves about that. So I hope the people of Ukraine win. I do agree that there is plenty of waste, fraud, and abuse there. And we need to figure out that waste, fraud, and abuse before we give them more money. There should never be an American soldier who dies in Ukraine. But I do want to make sure that they win. I don't want Russia to win. But we have to figure out the waste, fraud, and abuse before we start sending billions of dollars back over to Ukraine.
Mr. Williams.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, Ronald Reagan proved how to do this, peace through strength. In fact, the Iranian hostage crisis was ended when Ronald Reagan won and was put into office. He had to defeat Jimmy Carter. You want Ukraine to be solved? You want all the other issues to be solved? Let's elect Donald Trump and put him back into office, because he's certainly going to exhibit and advance peace through strength policy. That's how we're going to win, not by sending billions of dollars into a black hole.
Next question. How will you ensure transparency and accountability as a member of Congress? And I'll rephrase this in a different way as well. Once you get up there and you realize the sophistication of the Washington apparatus, how will you navigate that playing field and stick to your particular points of interest for the state of Colorado?
So there's a couple of points, I think, on transparency. The first one is, Congress throws everything, they don't do their job, and then at the end of the year, they throw everything into one of these omnibus bills. They don't know what's in it. Of course, Nancy Pelosi famously said, we'll pass it and then we'll figure out what's in it. That's what Congress does right now. It's not just Nancy Pelosi doing it. It's the Republicans doing it in the House and in the Senate because they aren't getting their job done. Look, I'm for members of Congress. I'll sponsor a bill that will say that members of Congress don't get paid if they don't get the budget done by October 1st, the beginning of the fiscal year. They shouldn't get a salary. So I'm all in favor of getting rid of, we've got to get back to a way to where we're doing appropriations bills. We can go down on the floor, we can offer amendments to cut spending, and it's transparent. No more of this nonsense of throw it all into a bill, vote on it in the dead of the night, and then we all find out what's in it. People should be able to go down and knock things out in amendments on appropriations bills. So that's very important. Also on transparency, I agree. I'm going to put, if I do stock trades, once I'm a member of Congress, I'm going to put them in a blind trust. I don't want to know what stock's being traded on my behalf. That's every single member of Congress should do that, in my view. I think transparency as a person, as a member of Congress, and doing the right thing is important. And again, that starts when you're this high. You learn how to do the right thing, and you do it throughout your whole life. You do it in private life, and you do it in public. And you look at a person, and you can tell if they're going to be for transparency or whether they're not going to be for transparency.
Mr. Williams, 2 minutes. Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I think I got it.
Very good.
Transparency and accountability are one of the most important things that you need to have faith in your institution, certainly the person that's going to represent you. When I ran for the legislature 6 years ago and I got elected, I made a promise to my wife. She asked me to do this one thing, and it was the best decision that I agreed to, when I got elected. And that was to come home every night, not to stick around the Capitol, not to be in this bubble where the lobbyists and the bureaucrats and the administrative state can wine and dine you or entice you or seduce you. I got out of there and I went back to my community. I went back to my home and grounded myself with my family, my friends, and my neighbors. You want to know why Washington's corrupt, in addition to everything that we've already discussed? It's because they insulate these guys. They make them think they're the best people in the world and that they're God's gift to the American public, and they walk on water. We need to get our politicians out of Washington and back home to their districts as frequent as possible so that they can see and hear and understand the problems that you face, so that they're not turning a blind eye to when they call you or when they get an email. The other way that I've been transparent and accountable to folks is I freely give my phone number. It's my only phone number that I have. It's my direct line. I'll give it right now. My phone number is 719-321-6363. That's 719-321-6363. If you have a problem, call me. Go to my house. That's publicly disclosed. Go to my website. I have my email there. Let me know what's going on. One of the failures that we've had in this district is a lack of communication and a lack of accessibility. That's going to change, and that's going to help ensure transparency, because the best thing to ensure transparency is sunshine. It's the best disinfectant, and I promise you that if your representative is completely 100% accessible to you, you're not going to have all the problems that you see in Washington.
Mr. Crank, 1 minute. Rebuttal.
Well, I won't take the full minute because I think generally we agree on the importance of transparency. But look, I agree. I think members of Congress, it's important to come home. When I worked for Joel Heffley many years ago, that's one of the things he told me. And by the way, when I talked about someone from being with the Ethics Committee, he was chairman of the Ethics Committee. I have great respect for him. I never saw him do something that was unethical or wrong, ever. He told me, he said, I always came home because I wanted to be in church, at my church, with the friends and family that I know. I don't want to be in church with the lobbyists from Raytheon or Lockheed Martin back in D.C. My intention's to come home. I'm from this community. I've spent 30 years here. Why would I want to go anywhere else?
Mr. Williams, 1 more minute.
I won't take the whole minute, but I'll say this. The other problem we have is that we have congressmen policing themselves. It's never going to happen. In fact, if you look at most ethics committee investigations, they don't really amount to much. So if we really want transparency and accountability, we have to figure out a way or reform the system so that we can actually hold congressmen accountable midterm and then absolutely kick them out of office if they're corrupt. That's one of the ways that we do need to reform, and happy to talk more about it afterward if you have any more questions.
All right, we had well over 100 questions come in, so thank you for exercising your role as the electorate. Well done. We're not going to get to all of these, so bear with me. I've been filtering through them. I'll try to get to the most salient ones to this debate. And then I'll move on to quick bios and then 3-minute closing statements from each candidate. Mr. Crank, if elected, what specific legislation would you introduce or support to stop rising inflation and address the national debt? 2 minutes.
Well, first thing isn't something I would introduce. I'll tell you about that in a second. But I will vote to extend the Trump tax cuts. That has to be done. They're going to expire next year. If they expire, our deficit, despite what Joe Biden and his administration says, our deficit will explode, because when you increase taxes, you actually decrease revenue to the federal treasury. We have more revenue coming in to the U.S. government today than we've ever had. Washington has a spending problem. They do not have, it's not a revenue problem, it's a spending problem. So we have to extend those Trump tax cuts. That's the greatest thing we can do for this economy. Second, we need to get control of the administrative state in the United States. We need to stop having the administrative state decide what kind of stove you can have, or what kind of car you can drive, or what kind of energy you can use. Those sorts of things are throttling back on the American economy. We need to remove regulation, and we need to fight to do that. We need to have a Federal Reins Act, which would rein in these administrative states and send it back to Congress. Let Congress decide these policies. If they want to vote, by the way, there's a court case, the U.S. Supreme Court, called Loper-Bright. You'll hear about it. The Supreme Court's going to decide it here very soon. If it goes right, and I think it will, I hope it will send all of these decisions back to Congress. If Congress wants to ban your stove, they're going to have to vote on banning your stove. They can't give it off to some bureaucrat somewhere to decide that they're going to ban a stove or a car. That would be revolutionary. Congress needs to regain its authority under Article 1 of the Constitution and make sure that they are in charge of the economy, not the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. Because if you don't like the decision Congress makes, you can throw them out.
Mr. Williams, if elected, what specific legislation would you introduce or support to stop rising inflation and also address the national debt?
Sure.
2 minutes, sir.
Sure. Look, this is the budget. There's a lot to the budget, and to try and look at a 30,000-foot level, I think right off the bat is a good start. We need to lower spending from it's about 23, 24% of GDP. We need to lower it to about 18. And over 10 years, then we can start to not only balance the budget, but also address the debt that we have on top of it. So that's one specific thing we could do. And in order to aid in that endeavor, we need to cut the administrative state. We need to cut the bureaucrats' jobs. Look, it's like the largest employer in this country is the federal government. They don't need to be living off your backs because you're the ones that pay their salaries. I mean, look at your paycheck. You're paying at least 50% in tax, whether it's federal, state, or local level. So let's cut those. Certainly people that are non-essential, right? And then as a part of that, we need to start instituting term limits, not just on the elected officials, but also on the administrative state, the civil servants, so-called. They shouldn't be making a career out of this because I'll tell you right now, they are the ones that are doing damage to our country. And you have a Congress, even if it was Republican or Democrat, they're asleep at the switch. They don't rein these guys in. They don't hold them accountable. So we need to not only get the elected officials out of there so they're not serving 40 years, 50 years, whatever it may be, but we also need to make sure that the so-called civil servants don't stay there because that's where all the institutional power resides. And if they don't like a particular president, if they don't like a particular elected official in Congress or the Senate, then they're just going to wait them out. And then they'll continue to do what they do best, which is waste your money and enrich themselves and create a fiefdom unto themselves. So those are a couple things that we would do if I were elected, and certainly happy to discuss more about other cuts to the federal budget that we can make. Thank you.
Mr. Crank, 1 minute rebuttal or further comment?
Sure. I guess I could say you didn't mention the Trump tax cuts, so you might not support President Trump, but I won't say that. Obviously, well, yeah, I hear you, John. This is John Hotelling, who is Doug Lamborn's campaign consultant. Walked out, by the way, in 2016 at the 2016 Republican convention, stood up, turned his back on President Trump, and walked out. And everybody knows it. Everybody knows it.
Please. Please.
Everybody knows it. Thank you. There's lots that we're going to do. There's lots that we're going to do. I talked about getting rid of the Department of Education. I will sponsor legislation to get rid of the Department of Education, the National Endowment for the Arts, National Endowment for Democracy, and many, many others. That's what we're going to do.
Mr. Williams, 1 more minute.
Look, I don't think I need to explain to everyone that I support tax cuts, but that's one part of the equation. You can't just do tax cuts and not address spending. So it's obvious that in order to unleash American enterprise and make sure that you all have the money to pursue the dreams and businesses that you want to pursue, yes, you need to keep more of your own money. But the biggest thing that we can do to unleash the American economy is to reduce the spending. They spend $3 trillion. I mean, they pass omnibus spending packages. Look, I'm proud not to be endorsed by Mike Johnson. You want to talk about single subject rules? You want to talk about dropping a bill that's thousands of pages on the laps of the American people and they're voting on it in 3 days? I'm not endorsed by Mike Johnson. My opponent is. You tell me what that means. I can tell you this. I'm not going to vote for that kind of stuff. I'm going to fight to reform it if you elect me to Congress.
Next question from the audience. Colorado's abortion law allows for any abortion up to birth, no questions asked. How do we balance states' rights with pro-life conservative faith-based principles? Mr. Crank, 2 minutes.
Well, on the abortion issue, that's just non-negotiable for me. It always has been. I've been pro-life from a very early age, and I have very personal reasons for that. I won't get into all of those because we don't have the time today, but I'd love to have a conversation with you later about why I am. It's non-negotiable. I am pro-life. I will always be pro-life, and I'm never going to cast a vote to kill unborn children. It's just that simple. Now, the federal government, the U.S. Supreme Court in the Dobbs decision, thankfully overturned Roe versus Wade, which was wrongly decided and poor constitutional law. And what they did in that was turn it back to the states. So the battle now comes back to the states. But I have to tell you, unlike President Trump, I am supportive of, if a bill comes before the Congress of the United States that saves unborn babies, I'm going to vote for it. That's just the way I am. I think what we've done in Colorado is atrocious. On this, my opponent and I will certainly agree. What they have tried to do in this state is heinous. And they have turned us into, a laughingstock, number one, of the state that we've become. But we have become the murder, abortion capital of the United States. We don't respect unborn children. We don't respect life. Look, I served on the board of Life Network here in Colorado Springs. I received their Champion of Life Award, and I was proud of doing that because it matters to me. And I will never turn my back on unborn babies.
Mr. Williams, would you like me to repeat the question? Sure. Because I moved on from it.
Okay.
Hold on.
It's an abortion question.
It is generally,
Sure.
okay, here it is.
Yeah.
Colorado's abortion laws allow for an abortion up to birth, no questions asked. How would we balance the state's rights with pro-life, conservative, faith-based principles? 2 minutes.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a firm believer that you don't get the right to do wrong, whether it's on the federal level or on the state level. Abortion is a stain on our country. It should never have been allowed in the first place, and we need to do everything we can to protect those who are most vulnerable, and that's certainly the unborn, that's certainly the preborn, and I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that that doesn't happen. In fact, I actually have a proven record of this. When that bill was brought forward to the Colorado legislature, me and my colleagues fought for 24 hours straight. We engaged in a filibuster to try and do what we could to stop it. Unfortunately, we didn't have the numbers. We only had 24 of us, and we got outmaneuvered because they had the majority. But we kept up the good fight because that's what's required on this particular question. The other thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we're not allowing for abortion tourism in the state. And so that's the kind of legislation that we'll put forward in Congress to make sure that people just don't come here because we have the worst abortion laws in the country. But the one thing I want to address is that me and my opponent will certainly say that we agree on this issue, but ladies and gentlemen, Jeff was a paid lobbyist for the Chamber of Commerce back in the 2000s where he supported Richard Scorman. I don't know if you guys know who Richard Scorman is, but he's not the pinnacle of pro-life policy. The guy is a radical Democrat that supports pro-abortion policies. You do what you will with that, but I'll tell you right now, I'm not going to support a policy nor a candidate that wants to kill and slaughter babies in their womb.
Mr. Crank, 1 minute.
Well, there you go again, Dave. Look, that was a debunked argument that my opponent and his political consultant over here have been trying to lie about for 18 years. I've spent 14 years on the radio. Everyone in this community knows I am pro-life. I received the Champion of Life Award for a reason. It's for working to save unborn children at Life Network and to treat the mothers and the fathers with respect and dignity and help them make the right choice. Now, part of the reason we didn't have the votes in the legislature to get those bills passed is because my opponent has spent too much time fighting other Republicans than fighting Democrats. And that's what he's spent the last few months as chairman doing. He sends out press release after press release about this Republican and that Republican, how bad they are. Where's all the money to fight Democrats? It's going to him, it's going into his pocket, and it's going into his campaign.
Mr. Williams, 1 minute.
Look, ladies and gentlemen, again, my opponent is more than happy to pay lip service to this issue. But when it comes to a basing decision or it comes to supporting Richard Scorman, he's going to sell out his values because he's a paid certified lobbyist, or at least that's what he was back when it happened. And let's talk about the Republican Party. Is anyone actually happy with the Republican Party right now nationally? No, and it's because they've failed us. If we want to govern, if we want to have the privilege of governing, we have to clean our own house. Do we all magically think that Republicans in Congress somehow are unresponsible or their hands are clean when it comes to the problems of this country? They're not, because there is a very real uniparty. And if we don't have conservative fighters who are actually going to advance our mission of limited government, then we're never going to win, and the American people are never going to trust us. So yeah, if you're a bad Republican, we're going to call you out because we have a standard that we need to adhere to.
Okay, this is the last question for
Could
the
I get a
audience
rebuttal
tonight.
on that? You mentioned me.
I did not recall. He said he.
Okay.
Okay,
All
just to
right.
be fair.
All right.
I appreciate it, but to be fair, Republicans historically have understood that tariffs and other forms of protectionism were negatives for our own economy. Notwithstanding tariffs on China, should we be increasing tariffs on Canadian timber, South Korean steel, and other items? Mr. Crank.
No, we should not. I'm not for tariffs. Tariffs are another tax. They're a tax that you pay. If the Biden administration puts, which they just did, put some tariffs on many different countries, when you put a tariff on a country, who pays it? If you put a tariff on a television coming in that's manufactured in Mexico, who pays the tariff? Mexico raises the price of the TV, and you pay it. So it's a tax on you. I'm for free trade, but we've got to have free trade with fair agreements. And that's the key. The Biden administration has not done a good job of negotiating good trade agreements. President Trump did do a very good job of negotiating with a trade agreement with Mexico, renegotiating what was the old NAFTA treaty, and many other treaties. And I look forward to working with President Trump on getting good, fair, free trade agreements, because free trade agreements are good and the American worker can compete if we give them the opportunity to do so. But to just come in and pass tariffs, in fact, it was funny, Joe Biden used to be against tariffs, and now, of course, he's for them when he's the president. So we've got to get away from trying to go to battle with other countries on tariffs. Let's just beat other countries. Let's just produce better things and do it with free and fair trade agreements, and those trade agreements are the important part.
Mr. Williams, 2 minutes.
Yeah, we absolutely need to get away from tariffs. And in fact, we need to go a step further, and we need to make sure that not one single executive like Joe Biden can make that decision. We need to restore that power back to the Congress so that your congressmen and women, if they even decide to try and increase prices on you through tariff taxation, then you have the ability to kick them out of Congress and they can't buck or pass the buck and say it's someone else's fault. Free trade is essential. Opening up markets is essential. We can do that, and we should develop policies that ensure that people are interacting in the voluntary exchange of goods and services. Peace through trade is one of the things that we could do and that we should do. If we're going to be successful, we definitely need to ensure that our trade policy doesn't include punishing American families and businesses like yourselves. But we also do need to be mindful of the national security risks that are involved as well. Again, earlier I talked about rare earth minerals. That is a big deal. Rare earth minerals is being dominated by China right now, and if we don't use every tool at our disposal to ensure that we can be competitive in that market, then it's going to harm our military, and it's going to certainly harm free enterprise in this country. So, couldn't agree more. We need to be good on free trade, but it does have to be fair to American workers and businesses.
Mr. Crank, 1 minute further.
Well, I mean, I think we all agree. We agree on this. We have to have free and fair trade. The American worker can do what they do. But look, Joe Biden has been bad for America on trade. He's been bad for America on the economy, and he's making it tough on the American people, on single moms who now have to decide whether they're going to send their kid to camp over the summer or whether they're going to get, you know, a new used car, because they sure can't afford a new car because of Joe Biden's policies. So, you know, it's important on trade that we keep the American worker in mind and the American consumer in mind, have good trade agreements, and that's what's so important.
Additional minute? You good?
I think we covered it.
Very good. All right, we're going to move to the closing portion of this debate. And before each candidate speaks for 3 minutes, I'm going to jump in with a quick biography. We skipped this in the beginning so that we could get the candidates to work very, very quickly and get to some of the points we wanted to have a conversation about. Born and raised in southern Colorado, Jeff Crank grew up in a blue-collar family of 5 children. The son of a World War II U.S. Navy veteran, Jeff found his passion for the liberty that America provided. He learned that to preserve the freedom that his father helped to win, his generation had to step up and defend the American way of life. After graduating from CSU, Jeff worked for Congressman Joel Heffley, who represented the 5th District of Colorado. He married his college sweetheart, Lisa, and started his 3-decade-long career as an activist for conservative causes. Jeff helped keep Fort Carson open through the 2 rounds of base closures and helped write legislation. Jeff loves the outdoors, particularly hunting. Back in Colorado Springs, he served on the board of Life Network, served as Senior Vice President of Government Affairs at the Colorado Springs Chamber of Commerce, plus over 20 years of broadcasting experience, including 14 years at KVUR. Jeff and Lisa have a son and a daughter. Mr. Crank, you have 3 minutes for your closing statement, sir.
Well, again, Dirk, thank you. Great job. I know it's not easy doing it, and I wrote your phone number down, so I'll send my comments to you later.
It's not
Oh,
mine.
it's not your phone. Okay. All right. Anyway, thank you again to Salem, to the Lincoln Club of Colorado, and the El Paso County Young Republicans for sponsoring this. Been great, and it's been awesome being with you and being able to share my thoughts about why this district deserves to have the best representative in the United States Congress. Look, I've spent 30 years, grew up, this is my home, and we see what's happening to Colorado. We see what's happening to it, and it isn't good. We see what's happening in Denver. This isn't the place that I grew up in. We all see it, and we know it, and we understand it, and we have this uneasy sense. Look, we have two things we've got to do. We've got to rebuild a Republican Party so that we can elect Republicans. Stop fighting Republicans and elect Republicans and beat Democrats. That's important. We're losing ground in Colorado. We're losing our freedoms. We're losing our liberties because we have not focused on getting good candidates elected in Colorado. Second, when I go to Washington, D.C., there's tons of work to do. First and foremost, the border. We've talked about that a lot. That's job number 1. Holding Joe Biden accountable, fixing the border, getting border security. As I mentioned, I've been down there twice. I've talked to the Border Patrol agents. It's a crisis. There's no doubt about it, and we've got to get it fixed. Second, we've got to fix the economy so that working moms don't have to make that choice that I just talked about do I get, do I find, send my kids to camp, or do I, go and do something else with the money? People are hurting right now. They have to make a living. They go buy groceries. It doesn't go as far as it used to. We see that every day. We've got to fix that economy for the American people and for the people of Colorado Springs and for El Paso County. And finally, we've got to examine the size and scope of government and not just examine it. We've got to fix it. There isn't much time. We're $35 trillion in debt. We either do it now or we sentence our children and our grandchildren and their children to doom. If we lose America, we lose everything. This is it. I've fought 30 years for freedom and liberty. 30 years I've fought right here in this community. I'll fight for you in Washington, and I will never give up. This has been my life's call, is to fight for liberty and freedom. I do it for my kids so that they can have a better life. I want to go to Washington, and I want to do it for you as well. Thank you for being here.
Dave Williams grew up in a military family where hard work and sacrifice were taught. It is here that he learned the importance of our country and its impact on the world. A deep commitment of faith, patriotism, and civic duty are the cornerstones of his upbringing, as well as his continual sources of strength and guidance. From 2017 to 2023, Dave was the first Latino elected to State House District 15 and has served in several leadership capacities in both small business, state, and national politics, while providing new energy and enthusiasm to help strengthen his community in Colorado. As the current chairman of the Colorado Republican Party, Dave has proven a conservative record and a steadfast commitment to the cause of liberty and freedom. Dave believes we need to encourage and hold accountable our elected representatives to such high principles. Dave is committed to working with grassroots to further the cause of liberty and ensure that freedom is passed on to future generations. Mr. Williams, 3 minutes for your closing remarks.
Leadership. What is it? I happen to think it is synonymous with service to others, putting others ahead of yourself. What not many of you understand or know is that when I took over the Republican Party a year ago, by the way, so I wasn't the one ruining the party like the ones supporting my opponent, right? They've been in charge for 20 years. Some of them are in this room right now. They have the burden to bear for why Colorado is where it's at. But when I took over the party, we were in debt. We only had about $8,500 in the bank account. I didn't take pay, neither did my treasurer, and we did whatever we could to eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse, which did exist in the Republican Party. And the reason I tell you that is because I want you to understand how important this race is, but to a larger extent, what we're going through in the Republican Party. Right now, we have a battle for the soul of our party. America First, MAGA, grassroots conservatives versus globalist establishment, status quo Republicans that don't really care about you guys. In fact, they work with Democrats to continue to screw you over. So the question is, what do you want? I'm proud to say that when I took over the Republican Party, we turned it around and actually have $500,000 in the bank, and we've eliminated a lot of that fraud, waste, and abuse. But the media won't talk about it. The Democrats won't talk about it. My opponent won't talk about it. And what you also don't know is that Donald Trump asked me if I was going to stay as chairman of the Colorado Republican Party because he trusted my judgment, he trusted my work. And I ask you to join him and trust his judgment, trust his endorsement, because our party's nominee needs backup in Washington, D.C. One of the reasons he failed, or didn't fail, the reason that he was hindered back in 2016 when he first won was because we had too many Republicans standing in his way. You don't believe me? Look at Liz Cheney. Is that a Republican you want me to defend? Absolutely not. She's spent a career screwing over the American taxpayer. You want me to defend Mitt Romney? Absolutely not. The guy works with Democrats to ruin this country. That's what's at stake here. What kind of Republican Party do you want? Do you want a Republican Party that actually adheres to the promises that it makes in limiting government? Or do you want just another say-anything politician who's going to pay lip service to what you want to hear and then nothing changes? We've had decades of Republicans telling us they're going to go limit government, but then they don't. And it's got us to $35 trillion in debt. I ask you to support me and trust Donald Trump because together, you and I, with President Trump, we can secure the border, we can cut inflation and taxes and spending, and we can make sure that this American experiment is successful for you, not for the elites, not for the uniparty. Please vote for me. Visit my website at daveforcolorado.com, and my phone number again is 719-321-6363. Thank you so much. I look forward to your support.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the U.S. Congressional District 5 for House debate here at Centennial Hall at the El Paso County, Colorado offices. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for participating through text. You did a great job. And I started to learn that every one of those messages had about 5 questions underneath it. So it was a bit dubious. Before we depart, I would like to give Chris Gold from Salem Media, Colby Zipper, president of El Paso County Young Republicans, and Drew Bolin, president of Lincoln Club, a round of applause for hosting tonight's event. And of course, we'd be remiss not to thank the two candidates, Mr. Jeff Crank and Mr. Dave Williams. Appreciate it, Jeff. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending. Good evening.